I will now ask the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to grace us with prayers.
Morning, members. Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations, for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the governor of our islands, the premier, the speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the leader of the opposition, ministers of the cabinet, ex officio members, and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May the Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace, now and always. Amen.
Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed.
Administration of oaths or affirmations.
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of messages and announcements.
None.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports. Report of the Standing Business Committee, third meeting of the 2017-2018 session of the Legislative Assembly, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Premier, Minister of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the report of the Standing Business Committee for the third meeting of the 2017-2018 session of the Legislative Assembly.
So ordered. Is the member making remarks there too?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Government Minute. The government's response to the reports of the Standing Public Accounts Committee on the reports of the Auditor General, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Premier, Minister of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Government Minute with respect to the reports of the Standing Public Accounts Committee on the reports of the Auditor General.
So ordered. Is the Premier speaking there too?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Section 77, subsection 7, or I should say Order 77, Suborder 7 of the Legislative Assembly Standing Orders states that the Government Minute shall be laid on the table of the House within 3 months of laying of the report of the Standing Public Accounts Committee and of the report of the Auditor General to which it relates. This Government Minute constitutes the Government's response to the reports of the Standing Public Accounts Committee on the following reports prepared and submitted by the Auditor General. The Cayman Islands Health System, January 2017. Ensuring quality health care and a healthy population, January 2017. Follow-up on past recommendations, July 2017. Financial and performance reporting, the entire public sector, ministries, portfolios, and financial performance reporting, statutory authorities and government companies for the years ending 30th of June 2014. Government programs supporting those in need, May 2015. National Land Development and Government Real Property, June 2015. Management of Travel and Hospitality Expenditures, May 2014. Collecting Government Revenues, September 2015. Government IT Securities, September 2015. Major Capital Projects, Building Schools, May 2015. And Management of the Nation Building Program, July 2015. Governance in Aviation Bodies of Key Findings, July 2017. The Cayman Islands Health Services Authority financial statements for 2015 and 2016. Social assistance programs, follow-up on past PSE recommendations, July 2017. The management responses contained in this government minute represent the views of the respective chief officers, heads of departments, and managing directors within the Cayman Islands Public Service. Mr. Speaker, this has been a source of constant and complaint by the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee and the leader of the opposition, and justifiably so. And this is the government's effort to address or redress those omissions over the past few years. Mr. Speaker, the responses are quite detailed, and it would take me, quite frankly, much more than an hour to go through them standing here, which I do not propose to do. So, Mr. Speaker, the government minute, having been laid on the table of this Honourable House, is now a public document and open to inspection and scrutiny by everyone, not just members of this Honourable House.
Thank you, sir. It is deemed to have been laid. Clerk.
The 14th report of the Commission for Standards in Public Life, 1st of August 2017 through the 31st of January 2018, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
The Honourable, the Acting Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 14th report of the Commission for the Standards in Public Life, which covers the period of 1st of August 2017 through 31st of January 2018, in line with its constitutional mandate found in Section 117, subsection 7, subsection G of the Cayman Islands Constitutional Order, 2009.
So ordered. Is the member speaking thereto?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your leave, I shall offer a brief overview of the 14th report of the Commission for Standards in Public Life. The Commission for Standards in Public Life continues to operate under the leadership of Mrs. Rosie Whitaker-Miles, along with members Mrs. Sheena Hislop and Pastor Cheyenne O'Connor. This report covers the progress made and the key issues arising from the work completed by the Commission during the second half of their third year in office. During the reporting period, the members tabled the Commission's 12th report and finalized and submitted the Commission's 13th report, met with the Honourable Premier to discuss the drafting instructions for the regulations and the proposed commencement date for the Law and the Standards in Public Life Amendment Law 2016, liaise with the Central Procurement Office regarding a commencement date for the Procurement Law 2016 and the drafting of the regulations, liaise with the clerk of the LA to arrange a meeting for the commission members to review the current register of interest at the LA, to be followed by a meeting with the Register of Interest Committee, finalized its review of the Public Authorities Law 2016 and issued a letter to the Deputy Governor's Office which provided the Commission's comments on the legislation, finalized its review of the draft 2017 Ministerial Code of Conduct, the Code, in comparison with prior draft version, and submitted its comments to the Cabinet Secretary, and followed up with the Ministry of Human Resources, Immigration, and Community Affairs regarding the Commission's concerns surrounding the Gender Equality Tribunal's findings on the matter of Arthur Lee et al. V. HM Prison Service. In the next reporting period, Mr. Speaker, the Commission intends to continue to follow up on both the drafting instructions for the Standards in Public Life Regulations and the commencement dates for the implementation of the law. In addition, the Commission will also further consider the Minister of Finance and Economic Development's response of 4th December 2017 concerning the procurement legislation and, if necessary, formulate a response, follow up with the Legislative Assembly to set up a meeting with the Register of Interest Committee and to review the current Register of Interest concurrently, follow up with the Cabinet Secretary on a response to its comments concerning the most recent draft of the Code, review the internal audit's report on the matter of Atherley et al. V. HM Prison Service when it becomes available, and participate in any public education and relations opportunities where possible. I encourage members of this Honorable House and of the public to familiarize themselves with the contents of the report, which is available online at www.standardsinpubliclifecommission.ky. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Civil Aviation Authority of the Cayman Islands Annual Report for the fiscal year ended 31st of December 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
The Honourable Acting Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honorable House the 2016-17 Annual Report of the Civil Aviation of the Cayman Islands.
So ordered. Is the member speaking to?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your leave. The Civil Aviation Authority of the Cayman Islands is the aviation regulator for all safety and economic aviation matters, functions as a statutory authority that relies on non-coercive revenues for its growth and sustainability. The revenues of the CAACI are mainly derived from the operation of the Cayman Islands Aircraft Registry as a strong, competing offshore registration option for aircraft owners, operators, and maintenance organizations based globally. For the period 1st of July 2016 through the 31st of December 2017, the CAA continued to experience increasingly aggressive competition as other jurisdictions introduce and find ways to compete for market share in the offshore aircraft registration market. Additionally, the authority remains challenged in its ability to attract and retain amply qualified personnel that meet internationally mandated standards for regulatory personnel. Many factors include constrained resources, competition from jurisdictions with highly competitive employment packages, and these are all challenges that the civil aviation continue to tackle. Despite these challenges, the CAA has been able to recruit a full complement of qualified technical staff and has targeted and achieved conservative growth and maintenance of market share, and has maintained a reputation as a credible regulator with excellent client service options. In addition, the CAA continues to retain the Governor's full designation for regulatory oversight for all functional areas of the Cayman Islands aviation industry. Its performance aligned with strategic objectives as follows. Objective 1, a modernized approach to regulatory oversight. The CAA maintains safety oversight of the Cayman Islands Airports Authority with periodic audits of the Owen Roberts and Charles Kirkconnell International Airports as licensed aerodromes, as well as monitoring safety parameters of commercial operations into the Edward Bodden Airfield on Little Cayman. Safety experts from the airworthiness and flight operations disciplines carry out their responsibilities to provide safety oversight of all aircraft operating globally on the Cayman Islands Aircraft Registry, and the issuance of appropriate aircraft and aviation maintenance organizations certifications and the crew licensing. In particular, the technical teams conducted safety oversight of all local air operator certificate holders, such as Cayman Airways Limited, Cayman Express, the MRCU, and Cayman Islands Helicopters, etc. Aircraft registered at the end of 2017 numbered 229. The CAA also issues approvals to maintenance organizations based globally, which allows them to maintain Cayman registered aircraft to the specific standards of our regulatory code. At the 31st of December 2017, Mr. Speaker, there were 351 approved maintenance organizations globally holding CAA approvals. The CAA continues to enjoy a very healthy relationship with its counterpart in Saudi Arabia, the General Authority of Civil Aviation. The two authorities share technical regulatory oversight of aircraft operated commercially in Saudi Arabia under a UK-endorsed bilateral agreement, an Article 83 BIS agreement, which is registered with the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. The technical staff carried out periodic ramp checks and assessments of foreign carriers operating into the jurisdiction, and also worked closely with the local industry to introduce regulations aimed at the safe integration of small unmanned aircraft, drone technology, into the Cayman airspace. Objective 2, continuous improvement of service delivery. Continuous accessibility to foreign carriers for the processing of operating permits for non-scheduled commercial operations charters has continued to grow, with positive feedback from operators on performance indicators and as a revenue stream. In addition, in order to support growth and complete the CAA and to compete, the CAA is continuing to refine its bespoke electronic data management portal, VPC, online. That is highly regarded, and it receives positive feedback, Mr. Speaker, from industry participants. This tool allows registrants to manage data and apply for and receive certification and approvals in their own time zone via this secured platform. Objective 3, an adaptable, capable, and high-performing organization, the CAA has maintained a global presence at signature business corporate aviation forums in order to protect and grow market share and to afford staff the opportunity to understand the trends and the issues that pertain. As an enabling work environment, the CAA is committed to building an environment that equips its teams with the knowledge, tools, and leadership necessary to successfully perform their duties. Other noteworthy accomplishments for the period: during this period, the final establishment and implementation of the Aviation Park within the Cayman Islands Special Economic Zone, Cayman Enterprise City, was completed. Mr. Speaker, the CAA is now actively partnering with the CEC to market this niche market to potential target audiences globally to attract offshore commercial operators to the Cayman Islands Airport Registry. In addition, the CAA has progressed plans towards the development of new office accommodations to serve the CAA headquarters at 233 Owen Roberts Drive. Many of us would know this as the old Cayman Airways building, and I believe many in this honorable house may have had the opportunity to be there for the groundbreaking. Architectural plans submitted to Cayman Islands Planning Department were approved during the period, and final BCU approval and design details are anticipated in the third quarter 2018, with construction commencing in 2018 for a 2019 completion date. Financial analysis, Mr. Speaker. The audited financial statements just tabled consist of the statement of financial position, the statement of comprehensive income, the statement of cash flows, the statement of changes in equity, and the notes to the financial statements. The CAA's equity for the fiscal period indicate that the net worth of the organization has increased by $2,181,000, or 40% over the targeted net worth in the 2016-17 ownership agreement, and 48% increase over the prior year's actual net worth. This is due in part to the growth in the aircraft registry revenue of 4% targeted in the ownership agreement being attained. Aircraft registry revenue targeted was based on a 4% increase over the 2015 actual revenue. Growing the aircraft registry revenues by 4% year over year was listed as the first strategic objective in the 2016-17 ownership agreement with the Cayman Islands government. The target for aircraft registry revenue being achieved with little to spare indicates the increased competition from the growth of offshore aircraft registers over the past 5 years. Such aggressive competition may have resulted in the decreasing number of aircraft being registered during the last 6 months of the period. The increase in total assets of $760,000 over the targeted amount in the ownership agreement is mainly due to cash and customer receivables generated through the continued growth in revenue from the aircraft register. However, Mr. Speaker, there is a trade-off between current and non-current assets targeted of $1 million due to the development and construction of the planned CAA office accommodations not occurring on schedule. $1 million had been budgeted for capital expenditure on this project during the period, which would have been expended from the CAA's cash reserve, and it remained unspent at the end of the year. The target for total liabilities was also attained, except for an increase in the post-retirement pension and health care obligation for long-serving CAA staff of $560,000, which reflects the 2017 IAS actuarial valuations for each retirement plan. These actuarial valuations are commissioned and recorded in accordance with the PMFL, or Public Management and Finance Law, each year. Operating activity during the 18-month period ended 31st of December 2017. In terms of that operating activity during the period, the following summary is important to note, Mr. Speaker. The CAA produced and attained the targeted total revenue of $11.6 million, with $9.4 million, or 82%, being attributable to the aircraft registry. It incurred total expenses of $6.4 million of the $6.9 million budgeted. The savings of $500,000 absorbs $325,000 attributable to service charges booked for post-retirement plans. These expenses are not actually incurred by the CAA, but are required to be recorded as part of operating expenses in keeping with IAS 19 requirements of the Public Management and Finance Law. Outside of these expenses booked for the post-retirement plans, the bulk of the authority's savings in total expenses were experienced in IT and other contracts where fees are being charged back to users of the online aircraft data management portal and general efficiencies in usage of contracted services. Some contracted services were lower than expected during the budgeted period, but have since increased to the expected levels. Mr. Speaker, the CAA generated an operating surplus in the amount of $5.2 million, higher than the forecasted $4.6 million. The CAA has paid $3,468,000 in dividends to the Cayman Islands government subsequent to the year ended 31st December 2017, and paid another $2,031,000 in September 2016 on total comprehensive income earned in 2016. The annual dividend payment is based on a directive which states that the authority should pay 75% of total reported comprehensive income to the CIG as dividends within 3 months of the financial year end. The authority has consistently been paying such sums to the government on an annual basis since 2009. The Minister of Finance has directed the authority to continue to abide by this directive for paying out cash reserves back to the government until such time as a new directive is given. The Auditor General's opinion. The Auditor General has issued, Mr. Speaker, an unqualified opinion on the financial position of the CAA as at 31st December 2017 and has stated that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Civil Aviation Authority of the Cayman Islands as at 31st December 2017. In looking to the future, Mr. Speaker, the CAA will focus on the retention of its full regulatory designation by the Governor in the United Kingdom for all functional regulatory matters. It will seek to recruit qualified personnel to ensure we can meet our regulatory mandate and to provide for succession planning and business continuity. It will seek to complete the CAA corporate offices at the old Cayman Airways site as approved by Cabinet. It will continue to target conservative growth of the aircraft registry by attracting qualified aircraft owners and operators. And it will aim to achieve the financial results of the approved budget for the upcoming fiscal periods. I'd like to commend the leadership and management and staff of the Civil Aviation for another solid year of performance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Islands Human Rights Commission, Promoting, Protecting, and Preserving Human Rights. Annual Report 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 2017 Annual Report of the Human Rights Commission, which covers the period 1st of January 2017 to 31st December 2017, in line with its constitutional mandate found in Section 116, subsection 8 of the Cayman Islands Constitutional Order 2009. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Briefly, with your leave, I shall offer a brief overview of the 2007 Annual Report of the Human Rights Commission, which relates to the period 1st of January 2007 to 31st December 2017. 1st of January 2017 to 31st December 2017. During the year, the Human Rights Commission continued to operate under the leadership of Mr. James Austin Smith, the tenure of members Mr. Benjamin Tonner, QC, and Reverend Donovan Myers came to an end during the reporting year, and member Mrs. Danielle Coleman resigned due to her joining the public service. Member Mrs. Lisa Ann Hurlston McKenzie continued to serve alongside new appointees, Reverend Dr. Yvette Noble Bloomfield, Mrs. Joni Kirkconnell, and Mrs. Dorothy Scott. Throughout the 2017 reporting period, the Human Rights Commission sought to continue to uphold its constitutional mandate of promoting understanding and observance of human rights in the Cayman Islands. Through the acceptance and consideration of complaints alleging breaches of human rights, by working closely with the Cayman Islands and British governments and with international, national, and local NGOs, the Commission tried to address the human rights implications of issues that have dominated the public agenda. Equally, the Commission sought to draw public and government attention to human rights concerns that have not yet received critical or public consideration. Mr. Speaker, in the process of considering complaints, the Commission addressed a majority of the rights, or 14 of the 24, set out in the Cayman Islands Bill of Rights. However, 2017 saw the majority of complaints made focusing on alleged breaches of the following rights, Mr. Speaker: private and family life, personal liberty, non-discrimination, lawful administrative action, and fair trial. The Commission continued to review numerous policies, procedures, and pieces of legislation developed by the Cayman Islands government to ensure compliance with the Bill of Rights. Mr. Speaker, notably, recommendations were made regarding establishing, following, and maintaining clear and fair rules and appeal complaint procedures for employees, ensuring clear and fitting communication of policies regarding the signing of petitions by civil servants to the widest target population, increasing accessibility to government services and documents by persons with a range of mental and disability statuses, and ensuring legislation and policies, especially those surrounding immigration, do not unjustifiably discriminate on the basis of national origin. The Commission also continued to increase engagement with public education in 2017. In December of that year, the Commission, together with the Constitutional Commission, launched 2 alternative formats of the Constitution for persons with sight or literacy impairments in Cayman, an audio Constitution and hard copies of the Constitution in Braille. The audio production marks the first official audio recording of any Constitution in the Cayman Islands history, and to the Commission's knowledge, the Braille publication marks the first ever official publication of a government document in Braille. Mr. Speaker, the Commission has worked hard over 2017 to promote human rights in the islands. However, it acknowledges that it would have been impossible for it to have carried out its work without the assistance of many members of the public, private entities, and Cayman Islands government employees, as well as the members' own employers. Those who provided particular assistance to the Commission's endeavors have been acknowledged in the 2017 annual report. Mr. Speaker, in the upcoming reporting period, the Commission intends to continue working to promote, protect, and preserve human rights in the Cayman Islands by accepting complaints of allegations or breaches of human rights, reviewing policies and legislation, engaging with the media and public, and conducting research on matters identified by the Commission as important. Specifically, the Commission intends on focusing its efforts on human rights issues related to the protection of children. I encourage members of this Honourable House and of the public to familiarize themselves with the contents of the report, which is available online at www.humanrightscommission.ky. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Islands Monetary Authority Annual Report 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs.
The Honourable the Minister of Financial Services.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 2016-2017 Annual Report and the related audited financial statements of the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority for the 18-month financial period ended 31st December 2017.
So ordered. Is the member speaking there too?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the annual report table for the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority is comprised mainly of 3 sections: an industry overview, organizational developments, and CIMA's audited financial statements for the 18-month period ending 31st December 2017. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General issued an unqualified opinion on the financial position of the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority as at 31st December 2017, and details of which can be seen in the annual report and audited financial statements. Mr. Speaker, giving a brief overview of the industry performance, efforts continued to strengthen and enhance the regulatory framework governing the financial services industry of the Cayman Islands during the 18-month period ended 31st December 2017. With respect to insurance, Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands remains the second largest domicile for captive insurance companies, and the jurisdiction continues to be the leading domicile for healthcare and group captives. As at 31st December 2017, there were 826 insurance licensees, including companies, managers, brokers, and agents under supervision. This, Mr. Speaker, was slightly down as compared to June 2016 at 862. However, the main reasons for cancellation of licenses during the 18-month period included a novation or commutation of liabilities to ceding or reinsurance companies, mergers and acquisitions of healthcare captives, and maturing catastrophe bonds. Mr. Speaker, the number of insurance companies stood at 696 at 31st December 2017, and the premiums generated equaled to US $12.4 billion. The assets held totaled US $61 billion. Mr. Speaker, during the reporting period of 1st July 2016 to 31st December 2017, 49 new insurer licensees and 5 insurance intermediary licensees were added to the Cayman market. Mr. Speaker, turning to funds, the Cayman Islands continues to be the jurisdiction of choice for the offshore hedge fund industry. The number of Cayman authorized funds remains consistently in excess of those of other jurisdictions. The total number of regulated funds as at 31st December 2017 was 10,559, comprising of 7,331 registered funds, 2,816 master funds, 331 administered funds, and 81 licensed funds. Speaking briefly to the trust and corporate company management services, Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands also remained a leading jurisdiction from which trust and company management services are provided. There were 147 trust companies licensed as at 31st December 2017, which is up from June 2016 at 130. Under the trust companies restricted license category, there are 61. Nominee trustees licensed are 51. Controlled subsidiaries registered are 45. There were a total of 129 private trust companies as at the 31st December 2017. Mr. Speaker, in the banking sector, as with many other financial centers, the jurisdiction recorded a decrease from 176 at June 2016 to 150 licensed banks as of 31st December 2017. As at 31st December 2017, total international banking assets stood at US $934 billion, and liabilities were reported at $934 billion. Domestic assets were $17.2 billion and liabilities were $57.7 billion. As at 31st December 2017, the jurisdiction ranked 8th internationally in terms of cross-border assets of $915 billion and 8th internationally by cross-border liabilities of $874 billion, banks licensed in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also highlight the further developments and organizational changes that took place at the authority during the 18-month financial period. In this regard, as at 31st December 2017, the authority obtained a staff complement of 204, an increase of 11% since December 2016. The organization's management and supervisory team were strengthened with the promotions of 32 employees across the regulatory and non-regulatory divisions. 50% of these were upper and middle management promotions. The key component of these reforms was the establishment of the Securities Supervision Division in July 2017. This division now separates the supervision of securities investment business from the former Investments and Securities Division. Additionally, during this period, the authority also established a specified unit to conduct inspection of licensees. Information technology has continued to improve efficiency in regard to conducting business with the Monetary Authority. The Regulatory Enhanced Electronic Forms Submission, known as REEFS system, was launched in January 2015 to facilitate new applications for prospective licensed entities and change requests for existing licensees and to submit mandatory financial returns. Since the introduction of REEFs, industry users have been able to submit information electronically, such as mandatory financial annual returns, change requests, and new license applications. Users also have the ability to track such related information and view any applicable fees. One of the prominent improvements is the processing and response times following the submission of a financial annual return. The platform has brought about substantial performance enhancements in the delivery and management of information for both CIMA and the financial services industry. While enhanced performance can be noted in several areas, one prominent feature is the newest addition to REIFs, which is escrow, which is a secured online fee payment module. Through this new service, users have the ability to track relevant fees and complete payments. This new feature, Mr. Speaker, was welcomed by users in the financial services industry. Mr. Speaker, speaking briefly about CIMA's international involvement, during the period, the authority remained active in the Group of International Financial Center Supervisors, or GIFCS for short. CIMA's managing director continued her role as the deputy chair of the GIFCS. Additionally, the authority continues to contribute to the work of the IAIS by its active participation in the IAIS Implementation Committee, Market Conduct Subcommittee, Education Subcommittee, and Signatories Working Group. Mr. Speaker, since 2013, the authority has been participating as a member of the Working Group for Financial Stability Board Regional Consultative Group for the Americas, and has been actively involved in the initiative on shadow banking and de-risking. During the 18-month period, representatives from the authority, along with the Ministry of Financial Services, met with key U.S. congressional staff, regulators, and stakeholders in Washington, D.C. to discuss the ongoing issue of de-risking, including the potential impact of reductions in correspondent banking relationships from the Caribbean's perspective. To further clarify the regulatory expectations regarding the de-risking issue, the Managing Director of CIMA and a representative of the Ministry of Financial Services also attended the Financial Stability Board's Regional Consultative Group for the Americas meeting in Nassau, Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, the authority is actively involved with the work of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. The authority participated in the assessment of the Cayman Islands anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism framework conducted by the CFATF in December 2017. The authority will continue to cooperate with the CFATF in order to enhance the country's AML-CFT framework and ensure that the jurisdiction remains financially robust. With such efforts will help to address the problems of criminal money laundering and terrorist financing, which is a global phenomenon. The authority also represents the jurisdiction on other organizations such as the International Organization of Securities Commissions, or IOSCO, the Caribbean Association of Insurance Regulators, CAIR, and the Caribbean Group of Banking Supervisors, the Association of Supervisors of Banks of the Americas, and the Global Forum on Tax Transparency and Exchange of Information's Steering Committee and Peer Review Committee, the Group of International Insurance Center Supervisors, the Caribbean Group of Securities Regulators, and the Offshore Group of Collective Investment Scheme Supervisors. Mr. Speaker, I have attempted to provide a summary of CIMA's annual report and highlight several key points. CIMA plays a critical role in our financial services industry and has proven its commitment to playing its part in contributing to the continued success of the jurisdiction. The government remains confident in the strength of CIMA and especially in its ability to continue to operate successfully in a dynamic and competitively global environment of the financial services industry. Thank you.
Sister Island Affordable Housing Development Corporation Annual Report for the 18 months ending 31st of December 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport.
The Honourable, the Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Sister Islands Affordable Housing Development Corporation annual report for 18 months ended the 31st of December 2017.
So ordered. Is the member speaking there too?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just briefly, I would like to just say that the Auditor General's report on page 3 in the opinion according financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the corporation as at 31st December 2017, its financial performance and its cash flows for the 18-month period from 1 July 2016 to 31st December 2017 in accordance with international public sector accounting standards. An unqualified report. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the chairman, the board, and the staff for this very successful program and all that it's done for affordable houses in Cayman Brac. Thank you.
Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport, annual report for the 18-month period ending 31st of December 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport.
The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to lay on the table of this Honourable House report the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport annual report for the 18-month period ended 31st of December 2017.
So ordered.
Just briefly again, Mr. Speaker, refer to the Auditor General. Note, in my opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the ministry as at 31st December 2017 and its financial performance and its cash flows for the 18-month period 1st July 2016 to 31st December 2017 in accordance with international public sector accounting standards. Unqualified report, Mr. Speaker. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Chief Officer and all of the people that have done such a sterling job at the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Thank you.
Questions to Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet?
No questions on today's order paper.
Mr. Speaker,
The member for Central Georgetown.
I rise in a matter of procedure, Mr. Speaker, in respect to a question that I laid before this Honourable House in the last sitting, but I've yet to receive any answers to those questions either in writing or on the floor of this Honourable House.
Have you checked with the minister responsible?
Now, I've checked with the clerk of the Assembly in that respect, and still I was told that I was expected to have it in writing, but I've not yet received anything in writing.
You have not received it as yet.
As yet, sir. And for the importance of facts, I wanted to make sure I explain which question it was in respect to. No. I just want to know, Mr. Speaker, when I'm going to get the answer to the question. It was to.
Well, I wouldn't know which minister is responsible, and therefore you would know. So I would suspect that you speak
without trying to
the
create
clerk
any
and therefore to the minister, relevant minister. She will speak to the relevant minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I have a similar question because I have a number of questions that have been submitted that we are not seeing appear in the order paper for this meeting. I'm just wondering if there's some delay or if the ministers are not getting the questions or we're not getting responses back because they will fall away, I think, if they're not dealt with by tomorrow, hopefully.
I would think that questions, when they are ready, would be sent to the legislature If they are not on the order paper, it means that they are not ready. And therefore, they would be put on when the minister in charge of the question, or the question is being put to, gets the question. And the Premier,
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the Deputy Leader of the Opposition that the answers to his question, which were asked of me, will be provided tomorrow. They're actually here, but they're not on the order paper.
tomorrow's order paper will carry questions. Thank you. Standing orders will be abided by, I would think, which is any question that is ready will be put on the order paper.
Mr. Speaker, could we suspend this?
The member from Newlands.
Could we then suspend the standing order so that they can all be put on the order paper? Since we've had 2 days now with no questions.
If the questions are ready, then they will be put on the order paper. There's no sense in suspending if the questions are not ready. So if the questions are ready, then they will be put on the order paper. According to standing orders, which is 3 questions per member. If a member has more, then I would think he would seek beforehand some resolution to the matter. I think the government has indicated that questions are ready, but were not ready in time for this order paper. Therefore, as the Premier said, it will be done tomorrow. If a member has more than 3 questions and those answers are ready, I would think that both sides would agree to answer the questions if they're ready. No, tomorrow morning. But to ask the questions, then the member responsible for asking the question would have done it beforehand. And that means a discussion between that member asking and the relevant minister. Thank you. Clerk.
Statements by honourable ministers and members of the Cabinet.
I've received statements from ministers. The Honourable, the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to provide this Honourable House with an update as to the progress on the establishment of the work agency. Mr. Speaker, some of this was dealt with yesterday, but the statement was prepared in advance of that. So if there's some repetition, it'll be for emphasis. Mr. Speaker, WORK is an abbreviation for Workforce Opportunities and Residency Cayman, representing an agency being built to restructure the country's approach to labor market support with regard to how employment and workforce development services in the Cayman Islands are delivered. Mr. Speaker, the synergies of similar processes and procedures along with shared support staff means that the work agency is best suited to also administer the permanent residency and Caymanian status applications in the future. Mr. Speaker, some have said in reference to the NWDA and the Department of Immigration that taking 2 departments, both of which are struggling to meet the demands, and pasting them together will be no different than what exists now. Mr. Speaker, with the introduction of the work agency, the majority of the systems, processes, and programming will be streamlined to reduce unnecessary burdens on customers, create efficiencies in terms of decision-making, and facilitate a platform to showcase employment opportunities for Caymanians. A significant amount of analyses, planning, and stakeholder engagement has been done to get this right, and we are determined to deliver on the promise for radical change with the vision of full Caymanian employment, coupled with a fair, efficient, and transparent work permit regime. Under the committed and able leadership of Interim Director Sharon Ralston, the work agency will deliver government's objective of ensuring that all Caymanians have the opportunity to successfully attain employment and that the Cayman Islands continues to function as a well-supplied business community that is globally competitive. Ms. Ralston is an ideal change leader who exemplifies passion, love of country, and an understanding of how to effectively manage this complex and transformational shift in service delivery. We are delighted to have her at the helm of this important project. Mr. Speaker, teams of individuals are hard at work on business process redesign, governance, staffing, and the introduction of cutting-edge technology necessary to support the efficient and effective operation of the new work agency. Mr. Speaker, the growth of our robust economy over recent decades was founded not on vast quantities of natural resources, but instead our successes have been built by the strong entrepreneurial spirit of Caymanians. Mr. Speaker, we plan to continue our forward progress, leaving no willing, able, and employable Caymanian behind. To help achieve this outcome, the work agency will be made up of 9 interrelated sections. The Labor Market Demand Assessment Unit works with industry to collect, collate, and analyze labor demand and supply data, facilitating the employer accreditation system. The Training and Development Unit uses analyzed labor market data, facilitates relevant and targeted training, and coordinates skills development programs to Caymanians to meet labor market needs. The Matching and Placement Unit is an improved national jobs clearinghouse function, or I should say has an improved national jobs clearinghouse function, conducts skills and aptitude assessments with career counseling for Caymanian job seekers to aid matching and placement. The Work Permit Application and Adjudication Unit processes work permits, permanent residency, and Caymanian status applications. The Appeals section facilitates the appeals process related to work permits, Caymanian status, and PR decisions, and manages freedom of information requests. The Compliance and Internal Audit Unit ensures compliance with established policies and immigration laws, law and regulations, prepares internal audit reports, reviews internal processes for efficiencies and continuous improvement, and provides investigation and enforcement support. The Customer Service, Finance, and Administration and Operations units make up the foundation which supports the work agency. Mr. Speaker, as with any society in the world, we must recognize that there are people who are not employable for a variety of reasons. However, we absolutely do know that there are qualified, ambitious, motivated, and hardworking Caymanians who are indeed unemployed, and in the current system, these Caymanians are almost impossible to track. The systems and processing being designed for work will provide a clearer understanding of who those people are, and we will be able to facilitate upskilling, training, or assistance by removing other barriers that may be preventing their integration into the workforce. In looking at this issue holistically, Mr. Speaker, the government is convinced that we also need to have a mechanism through which to effectively defend and support Caymanians who are unjustly passed over for promotions or otherwise disenfranchised within their organizations. Mr. Speaker, it is in these situations where Caymanians' career development is disenfranchised that the Fair Employment Commission will deliver results. This quasi-judicial body will have the power to summon witnesses and review evidence to reach decisions on the balance of probabilities. If an employer is found in breach of their obligations towards Caymanians, the Commission will have the power to administer punitive fines. Mr. Speaker, the project to establish the work agency is well advanced, with deputy directors being taken on board in the coming weeks and systems and technology coming on stream near to the year end to support a launch in January of next year. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Premier, there's a second statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I wish to provide the House and the broader public with an update on the government's efforts to make important and necessary safeguards to the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009. Before doing so, Mr. Speaker, I will provide some background for the benefit of members of this House and the public. Mr. Speaker, we will recall that in May this year, the House of Commons attached an amendment to a sanctions and anti-money laundering bill that was making its way through the United Kingdom Parliament. The bill and the amendment were passed by the Commons and then later by the House of Lords. This amendment requires the British Overseas Territories, but not the Crown Dependencies, to establish a public register of beneficial ownership and to do so no later than the 31st of December 2020. Failing this, the amendment requires the UK government to utilize an order in council to change our local legislation to implement a public register of beneficial ownership on our behalf. Mr. Speaker, this was not the first attempt by the UK Parliament to force the issue of public registers on the territories. Late last year, a similar attempt was made with a similar amendment, and we worked with our team in the London office and with the UK government to fight off that attempt. The UK government at that point was able to gather sufficient votes to help stave off the threat. In particular, Lord Ahmad, the Minister responsible for the Overseas Territories, fought on our behalf in the House of Lords and assisted us greatly to fend off the threat on that occasion. But unfortunately, in May, when the new amendment was introduced, the UK Conservative government, well, it's actually a coalition, but the Conservative Party, which has the vast majority of the seats on the government side, struggled with 19 Conservative members supporting the amendment and was unable to muster sufficient votes for its defeat. And so facing a possible vote loss, the government conceded, and the amendment passed in both the Commons and in the Lords. Again, Lord Ahmad, along with Lord Naseby and several other law lords, spoke up in the Lords to defend Cayman and the Overseas Territories. That final fight back in the Lords, led by Lord Naseby, is greatly appreciated. Lord Naseby has been a long-standing supporter of the Cayman Islands and is the current Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Cayman in the UK Parliament. This final effort in the Lords was encouraged and assisted by our team in the Cayman Islands London Government Office, led by me, because we felt that even though the House of Commons had done what it had done, this issue was so significant that it deserved at least another last gasp effort on the legislative front to see what could be done to prevent what had transpired from becoming reality. In the end, and we were quite aware before the end, that our efforts would not succeed because the UK government, in its weakened state, had declined to give its support. But the debate was useful as it allowed many law lords, including Lord Newburger of Abbotsbury, former president of the UK Supreme Court, to give their views and defend Cayman and the OTs on what we deem as an overreach by the UK Parliament. So despite not winning this final attempt in the Lords, the merit of the effort was borne out by that debate in the Lords, a debate that took place starkly in the frame of the constitutional overreach. We believe those speeches will aid not just in any legal challenge we make in the UK, if the UK proceeds to make the Order in Council as they are now mandated to do, but also in our efforts with the UK government when we enter into fresh constitutional discussions to put in place the necessary constitutional safeguards to avoid any future attempt of constitutional overreach by Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, I have said many times since the amendment passed in the UK Parliament that the Cayman Islands will not accept that the United Kingdom Parliament has the right to legislate for us when it comes to domestic matters that are devolved to local government. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we will not be changing any laws or making any moves to adopt legislation to implement public registries of beneficial ownership. If the United Kingdom does try to use an order in council to force the territories to adopt public registries, we are prepared to challenge that order in the Cayman Islands courts, where we are optimistic that we will be successful. And if necessary, we are prepared to take our case to the Privy Council in London, where we believe judges there will have to look at our local laws and take account of the devolved nature of local legislation, as well as consider the views of our local courts. Mr. Speaker, I raised this issue of a review of our Constitution with the United Kingdom Prime Minister Theresa May when I visited in London in May, and had considerable discussions with David Lidington as well as Lord Ahmad about it. David Lidington, Mr. Speaker, is the de facto Deputy Prime Minister and is in charge of constitutional matters within the United Kingdom government. I also wrote, Mr. Speaker, to the Prime Minister, Mr. Lidington, and Lord Ahmad as well. The United Kingdom, Mr. Speaker, has agreed to begin this dialogue, both in a letter from the Prime Minister as well as in conversations as recently as when I attended meetings in London during the week of June 11th. I have requested a time frame for us to commence talks, and I'm awaiting confirmation from the United Kingdom, which I hope to receive soon. Mr. Speaker, I have previously spoken to the Leader of the Opposition and a number of the other members of the opposition about what we are proposing in regards to constitutional safeguards, and I have their support, of which I and the government are most appreciative. Mr. Speaker, it is important that we in this House are fully in agreement on this important matter. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition and I have also met with the Chairman of the Constitutional Commission, Mr. Vaughan Carter, and discussed with him these issues. Mr. Speaker, just yesterday, I have received a substantive response in writing from the Chairman of the Constitutional Commission with recommendations from the Commission about proposed changes. I haven't yet had a chance myself to consider that. The letter is copied to a number of people. I'm not sure whether the Leader of the Opposition has received it, but if not, I will make sure that he does have a copy. Mr. Speaker, what we are striving for is to have aspects of the Constitution clarified to ensure that the ability of the United Kingdom Parliament to legislate for the Cayman Islands is significantly restricted. In particular, we are proposing that the power currently reserved to Her Majesty in Section 125 of our Constitution, which is the section that says Her Majesty reserves unto herself the power to legislate for the territories with respect to peace, order, and good government, be removed, as is the case with the Bermuda Constitution, or clarified to apply only to matters involving the most serious circumstances, such as a fundamental breakdown in public order or endemic corruption in the government, judiciary, or legislature. And further, Mr. Speaker, that it be made clear that the UK's power over international affairs be confined to the enforcement and implementation of clear international obligations of the United Kingdom alone, and that it also be made clear that provided the Cayman Islands is not in breach of international standards, the power of internal self-government is absolute, and that the power of this allowance with respect to legislation passed by the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands, and that the power of disallowance, this statement is wrong. Disallowance with respect to legislation passed by the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands be removed, as is the case with the Gibraltar Constitution. That is disallowance by the governor of legislation passed in this Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, in broad strokes, those are the measures that we are going to be pressing for in terms of constitutional change to prevent this sort of constitutional overreach which I referred to from recurring. This matter extends well beyond the issue of the position of public registers. Indeed, it extends well beyond even the implications to our financial services industry. If the UK Parliament, emboldened by what it has just done, comes to believe it can legislate for the territories anytime it disagrees with something in the territories, or anytime it believes that a certain situation should obtain within the territories, then, as I have said previously, it is not just our financial industry that is at risk, but really our very existence. Hence the reason we intend to do two things: challenge when appropriate should they attempt to implement public registers, and seek to insulate as far as possible the Cayman Islands from such further constitutional overreach. Mr. Speaker, I have also pointed out to the Prime Minister and Mr. Lidington that the exchange of notes and the technical protocol that the Cayman Islands and other British overseas territories have worked on over the course of almost 2 years have been vitiated. The exchange of notes allowed the exchange of information or the access to information in the Cayman Islands by law enforcement or tax regulatory authorities swiftly, and in extreme cases in as little as 2 hours where there is an urgent issue. The whole premise of that arrangement, the agreement we reached with the UK government, was that that would provide an alternative to the public registry regime. The actions of the Parliament have essentially vitiated that underlying agreement, and we do not believe we have any further obligation to the United Kingdom government under that arrangement. Mr. Speaker, I hasten to add, though, that I am not suggesting that the Cayman Islands government should seek or will not continue to cooperate with law enforcement and tax regulatory authorities in the UK government. That is certainly not the case. We believe we need to continue to play the important role we do in the global fight against international crime and tax evasion. I am simply saying that henceforth, our cooperation is as a result of our willingness and desire to cooperate, and not as a result of any obligation we have to the United Kingdom pursuant to the technical protocol and the exchange of notes, because the underlying premise, I repeat, for that agreement was that that would be an alternative to the implementation of a public registry regime. In all that we have done so far on this issue, I can confirm that we have met with industry and kept them abreast of developments. Importantly, we have taken the advice of two very senior members of the UK Bar in the persons of Sir Geoffrey Jowell, QC, and Lord David Panic, QC, both highly regarded constitutional lawyers, and we are following their advice in this respect. Mr. Speaker, as this matter progresses, I will keep this House and indeed this country advised. Indeed, before any final safeguards to our Constitution are agreed with the UK, we intend, and I assure members, that these matters will be properly debated in the House. And Mr. Speaker, I am doing everything I possibly can to ensure that every step of the way the Leader of the Opposition is kept apprised and involved in the various decisions that we take. And so far, Mr. Speaker, our cooperation, I think, is putting the Cayman Islands in the best possible position as we seek to address this issue. I am continuing to press the UK government for firm dates as to when we can actually sit down around the table and discuss these matters in detail. And I have received, or not me personally, but my office has received communication this week that we should shortly be getting a substantive response to the 3 outstanding letters that I have written to Lord Ahmad and to Mr. Liddington. Mr. Speaker, for the sake of completeness, I will read the response from the Prime Minister of the 7th of June this year and lay a copy on the table of this House. Dear Premier, thank you for your letters of 2nd and 23rd of May regarding the outcome of the debates on public registers of beneficial ownership in the overseas territories in the House of Commons on the 1st of May and in the House of Lords on the 21st of May. I was very pleased that we had the opportunity to discuss the issues firsthand when we met in person on 15th of May, and also during the teleconference with you and other territory leaders on 24th of May. I'm also pleased that Lord Ahmad was able to visit you recently. As I said in that teleconference, I recognize the strength of feeling on this issue from you and your colleagues. I would like to reiterate my thanks to the Cayman Islands and the other overseas territories with financial centers for the proactive steps you have already taken to promote beneficial ownership transparency. In particular, the establishment in your jurisdictions of central registers of beneficial ownership or similarly effective systems accessible to the UK law enforcement on request. We are very conscious of the potential economic impact of the introduction of public registers in the overseas territories in advance of a global standard, and I assure you that we will work collaboratively with you on this issue in order to secure the best possible outcome. The government will also use its best endeavors to promote public registers of company beneficial ownership as the global standard by 2023, and we expect the Crown dependencies to adopt public registers at that point. I am pleased that you have had the opportunity to meet with David Liddington, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, on 17th of May to set out your concerns. As you are aware, I have asked David Liddington to lead on the coordination across UK government of our approach to this issue. The constitutional relationship will be on the agenda of the Joint Ministerial Council later this month. Please rest assured that I greatly value our partnership with overseas territories. I encourage you to continue to work closely with Lord Ahmad and David Liddington to find a mutually acceptable way forward. I hope that there will be an opportunity to further discuss this when you attend the Joint Ministerial Council in June to continue to strengthen our partnership and all do our best and will do our best to safeguard and protect our common future. There's an error in the text. Yours sincerely, Theresa May. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wish to lay a copy of this on the table of the House, and copies are available for all members. So, Mr. Speaker, this matter is being taken, I believe, most seriously by the UK government at the very highest level. And I assure all members of this House and the broader public that I shall not relent in my efforts to having this matter addressed and to try to achieve the best possible outcome for these islands, both with respect to the issue of beneficial ownership registers, but more broadly, and I believe in the long term, more importantly, in terms of the continued modernization and advancement of our Constitution and the need, I believe, which is growing increasingly critical, for this territory to have more autonomy with respect to its affairs and to have some degree of insulation from the whims of the UK Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could just get the lectern at this time, that would be. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of this Honourable House and the public are aware that members of the government and the Ministry of Financial Services have been engaging with international politicians, leaders, and other officials about financial services developments that could impact our financial services industry and subsequently the economic stability and prosperity of the Cayman Islands and our people. For example, as a result of strategic and sustained engagements during the course of 2017, the government was successful in ensuring that the Cayman Islands was not included on the EU list of non-cooperative jurisdictions for tax purposes issued in December 2017. Mr. Speaker, since January of this year, we have continued and have indeed intensified our efforts to meet with key international stakeholders and audiences, starting with participating in the annual Cayman Finance Breakfast briefing session held in New York City, where I delivered a policy and legislative update and participated in a number of industry meetings in the city during the course of the week thereafter. Mr. Speaker, in March, in addition to speaking on a key financial services panel at the Great Festival of Innovation in Hong Kong, the Ministry of Financial Services hosted a very well-attended reception for clients and service providers in the region, where the actual attendees exceeded the expected and confirmed number. In addition, meetings were convened with a number of Hong Kong-based service providers, as well as a large group of leading private equity and venture capital firms, collectively representing over US $70 billion in assets under management, who are all familiar with and utilize Cayman vehicles for many of their international financial transactions. Mr. Speaker, in April, I traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with officials in the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate and with senior officials at the State and Treasury departments. And I should add, Mr. Speaker, I have another trip planned to return to Washington, D.C. later next month. In May, I traveled back to Brussels, where I was invited to speak at a seminar at the Center for European Policy Studies, along with Mr. Pascal Santamans, Director of the OECD Center for Tax Policy and Administration, and Mr. Jeppe Kofod, a member of the European Parliament. And I took part in a roundtable discussion at the European Business Summit entitled EU Taxation Policy, which impact on the EU attractiveness and competitiveness. Mr. Speaker, the European Business Summit is an annual summit of political decision makers, business leaders, members of academia, and civil society. Mr. Speaker, the summit represents the largest such annual gathering in Brussels. And it is important to note that this was the first time that the Cayman Islands was represented at such a summit. While in Brussels, I took the opportunity to meet with representatives from the EU Code of Conduct Group, the EU Commission, and the Council of Ministers, the entities responsible for the EU policies on taxation and for carrying forward the listing process and monitoring activities on behalf of the Ministers of Finance of the various EU member states. And of course, Mr. Speaker, as has been expressed already by the Premier, we have met extensively with local financial services industry and business representatives every step of the way, keeping them updated on our progress and activities. Mr. Speaker, the reason for this activity is based upon the need, which has existed for many years, for increased political and other industry engagement. 2013, for example, was a pivotal year when the UK chaired the G8 and sharpened international attention on taxation and the sharing of tax information, referred to as the tax transparency among countries to thwart cross-border tax-related crimes. Mr. Speaker, more recently, in 2017, major global regulatory bodies assessed Cayman's financial services legislation, regulation, and operational effectiveness for the compliance with internationally accepted standards. These were the OECD Global Forum Peer Review of Tax Transparency and the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force's review of anti-money laundering and countering of terrorism financing standards. In addition, the EU Code of Conduct Group's review of non-cooperative practices for tax purposes took place during that same year, as I discussed previously. Mr. Speaker, following these assessments, 2018 is proving to be a greater challenge, given the need for follow-up actions. In fact, despite retaining our OECD Global Forum rating of being largely compliant for tax transparency and exchange purposes, the same rating, I may add, given to Germany, Belgium, Australia, and Canada, being assessed under even more stringent criteria as we have been in 2017, as in the 2017 criteria was a stronger criteria than the previous assessment, and we were still able to retain that rating, as evidenced by the actions taken in the UK Parliament, most recently in relation to the sanctions and anti-money laundering law. Much work remains to be done in order to dispel the misperceptions and misunderstandings about Cayman and about our legal and regulatory framework that still exist in the United Kingdom and elsewhere. Mr. Speaker, to respond to these challenges, the Cabinet has agreed to allocate additional funding and support to the Ministry of Financial Services in order to bolster the Ministry's ability to address the challenges, as well as to better take advantage of the opportunities that lie ahead. These include continuing and increased engagement, increased staffing, and promotional activities. Mr. Speaker, Cayman needs to continue engaging with the European Union regarding its list of non-cooperative jurisdictions. There is a continued lack of clarity, particularly on the issue of economic substance, which the EU is trying to impose on targeted jurisdictions such as the Cayman Islands. As direct engagement has proven to be most effective thus far, an increase in the number of visits to the EU to engage with stakeholders is necessary prior to the end of 2018. And Mr. Speaker, as discussed previously, a program of increased engagement in the EU and elsewhere is already underway and will continue throughout the year. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, in the UK, the recent amendment adopted to the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Law seeks to impose a public register of beneficial owners on overseas territories by the end of 2020, even though it was recognized not to be the global standard. Mr. Speaker, it is instructive to note that the government spokesperson in the House of Commons, in accepting the amendment without debate, indicated that the decision was taken by the UK government to do so based on what they understood to be the prevailing perception of the majority in Parliament, not based on facts. Mr. Speaker, this is a stark example of the need to help educate MPs as well as the wider British public about the Cayman Islands. Increased direct engagement and a sustained public awareness campaign is needed and is being developed accordingly. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Financial Services has operated with a sparse staff complement of 4 policy officers for the past several years. Given the ongoing challenges presented by global developments, the need for greater research and analysis, and a more proactive approach to tackling domestic and international issues, a significant increase in the department resources is needed. Whereas the government had already recognized this, and in the 2018 budget included provision for 2 new staff members, additional posts have been agreed for this year and is being recruited as we speak. These additional posts would allow the department to become more proactive in tackling the increasing range of challenges, creating greater capacity to carry out the critical functions of the department. Mr. Speaker, in addition, Funds have been approved by Cabinet and provisions are being made to recruit a full-time member of staff to cover the UK and Europe based out of the London office. This would not only increase capacity, but also financial services expertise on the ground to enhance the efforts already being made in the UK, Brussels, and elsewhere in Europe, but in a more sustained and regular manner, rather than relying primarily on cross-Atlantic visits. Mr. Speaker, additional staffing has also been agreed for the Department of International Tax Cooperation, which has also operated with minimal staff, particularly in the area of international cooperation officers for the past few years, even in the face of increasing demand for those services. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the persistent misperception regarding the role of Cayman Islands in facilitating tax crimes and money laundering has contributed to the poor receptivity of the facts regarding Cayman's transparency and compliance with international standards. Direct engagement with key stakeholders has had success, Mr. Speaker. However, the country has not adequately addressed the role of the media and public in influencing political decisions abroad. Current consideration is for the development and execution of a targeted public awareness campaign focused primarily in the UK in the first instance, but expanding to other jurisdictions over time. Mr. Speaker, it is anticipated that the campaign will start during the course of this year. Because you see, Mr. Speaker, getting the key messages out in simple and relatable methods and means is key. The Ministry continues to consult with relevant stakeholders, including SEMA and industry representatives, in developing and deploying appropriate messages, and with respect to the ongoing international engagement efforts, as you have heard throughout the course of this morning. Mr. Speaker, given the importance of the work undertaken by the Ministry of Financial Services, in consultation with our regulators and financial services industry, I wanted to take the opportunity now to apprise this Honourable House of the increased proactive steps that the government is taking in order to better equip the Ministry and relevant departments to carry out the work needed in order to effectively meet the challenges ahead, and to create and take advantage of the opportunities that exist in key markets such as the US and Asia. I will, however, be making a further statement in accordance with Section 11.5 of the Public Management and Finance Law upon the presentation of the supplementary budget of the government to this Honourable House. But as I said, I did want to inform the people in this House as well as the public about the government's approach to taking these proactive steps at this time. Thank you.
Member has a second statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands is hosting the 23rd Annual General Meeting for the Caribbean Port State Control Committee meeting for the Caribbean Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, on Port State Control, PSC, this week from the 27th to the 29th of June 2018 at the Grand Cayman Marriott Beach Resort. Mr. Speaker, the Caribbean Memorandum of Understanding, or the CMOU, on Port State Control is a system that maintains a watchful eye throughout the territory to ensure that shipping is conducted in a safe, secure, and environmentally friendly manner. It was established in order to have the regional cooperation between different ports in the Caribbean. The Cayman Islands is a member state of the CMOU for Port State Control, which has a membership of 25 countries. Mr. Speaker, the collaboration between the 25 participating maritime administrations means that they agreed to implement a harmonized system of port state control across the Caribbean. Port state control is globally recognized as an effective tool to reduce the number of substandard ships operating on the world's seas and oceans. Mr. Speaker, port state control is important because it promotes ship safety and protection of the marine environment. A damaged oil tanker, oil spills, and wildlife coated in oil. We have all seen such appalling pictures, Mr. Speaker. Fortunately, such disasters are quite rare. However, if, for example, a tanker does run aground or breaks apart, the consequences are often catastrophic. Mr. Speaker, the goals of the Port State Control are to avoid such accidents, improve ship safety, and single out low-quality or defective ships. Ship inspections are carried out by specially trained officers who check if ship owners and the registries with which their vessels are flagged, also known as flag states, abide with the international provisions of ship safety, protection of the marine environment, and the requirements for working and living conditions of seafarers as set out in the various conventions and standards implemented by the International Maritime Organization. Mr. Speaker, there are many benefits for the Cayman Islands as a member of the Caribbean MOU, one of which is the common interest in the region. Having regional cooperation between port states, which are countries that have the responsibility to carry out the port state control inspections through the Caribbean MOU, reduces some burden and need to inspect all the ships. So if a ship has recently inspected at a country or has been recently inspected at a country that is part of the Caribbean MOU, there would be no need to inspect that ship again in Cayman. Mr. Speaker, the sea and all things maritime are deeply entrenched in our Caymanian culture and heritage. Our fathers and grandfathers went to sea to earn a living as merchant mariners and fishermen. Some of these men were shipbuilders before the war. It was our forefathers who developed the Cayman Islands Shipping Registry some 115 years ago, which has been a significant contributor to the Cayman's economy and international reputation. Mr. Speaker, as a small island nation, Cayman's link with the sea is inseparable. We have a vested interest and a responsibility to implement the conventions and standards of the International Maritime Organization, and the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands has earned significant global recognition in doing so, holding top positions on the major MOUs, such as the Paris MOU, the Tokyo MOU, and the U.S. Coast Guard Agency. And this is a true testament to the quality of the fleet flying the Cayman flag. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, the Cayman flag carriers are considered whitelisted when they go into these various ports, which means that they are less likely to be boarded and inspected as a result of the recognized high standards being carried out by the Cayman Islands as a flag state. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands continues to support the CMOU because no country would want to welcome a substandard ship in their territory due to the possible environmental threats that these ships may pose. The CMOU helps to prevent ships from polluting the waters, keeping our beautiful white sandy beaches pristine. In order for tourism to remain as one of the pillars of our economy, which employs many Caymanians, we need to continue to uphold and support the mandate and initiatives of the CMOU. Mr. Speaker, the CMOU also helps to promote the safety of sea life, or life at sea, and the protection of seafarers, which are concerns many Caymanians can relate to, given our seafaring heritage. In addition to the positive impact on the environment and seafarers, the Cayman Islands has, as a Caribbean MOU member state, the ability to provide training for persons to become port state control inspectors, therefore providing job opportunities for our young Caymanians. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands is not just chasing global accolades as being the top super yacht registry in the world and a leader in maritime code development. We are also playing a significant role in the port state control regime for the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, we are not only talking the talk, but we are certainly walking the walk as a jurisdiction. Thank you.
I have also had notice of a statement from the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to share with you some recent notable achievements by the Ministry of Health, Environment, Culture, and Housing. Over the last several months, we have taken decisions and begun the implementations of projects going forward that will shape the future of physical and mental health care for all persons within our islands, including those aged 65 and over. As many of you will be aware, we have also made some headway recently on the very important area of environmental health. Given the venue for our discussion today, I would like to begin by reporting on where we are with two very important pieces of legislation. We are about to begin a 60-day consultation period on the first, which speaks to the decisions that patients and their families must make surrounding the sensitive topic of end-of-life care and treatment. The other adds regulation to already existing legislation that aims to facilitate the ability to transport donated human tissue and is set for imminent implementation. Mr. Speaker, with regard to the first of these, earlier this spring, Cabinet approved the 60-day consultation period for the Health Care Decisions Bill 2018. My ministry is set to begin this project immediately, pending approval of the consultation plan currently before Cabinet. I would like to say a few words here about the reason we believe this legislation is so important, Mr. Speaker. At the annual healthcare conference 3 years ago, at the end of the session on the same subject, stakeholders expressed the need to develop appropriate legislation and guidelines. They felt this would allow medical professionals and family members to uphold patients, express preferences about their treatment, and end-of-life decisions. We currently have no such legislation in place, Mr. Speaker. As a result, healthcare providers face many difficulties with families and caregivers of patients who are unable to make decisions for themselves or whose preference for treatment cannot be honored. Mr. Speaker, this bill is the outcome of substantial work over the past year by the team within my ministry and by a committee chaired by our chief officer, comprised of all relevant healthcare stakeholders. A second key public consultation is already complete and focused on fine-tuning already existing legislation concerning human tissue transplant and donation. This is all in preparation for the law which regulates this process to take effect. Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, Cabinet approved and the ministry undertook a 60-day public consultation period for the draft human tissue transplant and donations regulations. This was preceded by work by a review committee to finalize these documents for the public consultation and Cabinet consideration. During the consultation period, members of the public were in full support of the legislation. They particularly supported the Cayman Islands joining an overseas organ donation network whereby our patients would gain priority on other international registries. Work on this has been ongoing for some time and spanned many previous administrations. In 2010, another review committee developed legislation to allow for human organ and tissue transplants to be performed in the Cayman Islands, which was eventually passed by the House 3 years later. Mr. Speaker, that team built on the work another committee established in 2005 by the then Ministry of Health. Given the painstaking pace of progress in this area, we are excited that we are now in the process of taking the final steps to prepare the Cayman Islands for the imminent implementation of the human tissue transplant donation law and regulations. Mr. Speaker, some noteworthy measures called for by the legislation and which the public will soon notice include the creation of a Human Tissue Transplant Council. This body will monitor the donation of tissue by living persons and the removal of tissue from deceased persons. It will also regulate the collection and use of human tissue for medical, commercial, and incidental or connected purposes. We are all aware that transplants of human organs and tissues can save lives and improve health. Having this legislation framework in place is an essential first step towards establishing an organ donation registry in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, as such, I would like to personally thank all the stakeholders from the Ministry and the Health Services Authority, as well as our professional and community partners who have worked to progress both pieces of legislation to this point. The process of seeking input from the people of the Cayman Islands that makes their wishes clear is something that further enriches our understanding of these important topics. I believe it will stand us in good stead as we progress both pieces of legislation to their natural next steps. Mr. Speaker, while we are on the topic of health care, I would like to take this opportunity to offer up kudos for the recent sterling work done by the National Working Group on the antimicrobial resistance, known as the One Health Group. This interdisciplinary team, led by the Public Health Department, recently held their second annual symposium. The conference brings together local, regional, and international experts to share with each other information and best practice on how we can combat the scourge of antimicrobial resistance in humans and animals. I understand that attendance grew by more than 60% this year over 2017. Mr. Speaker, the local effort is a part of the larger collaboration amongst the global healthcare community led by the World Health Organization. Standing on the podium to address the audience, it gave me considerable reassurance to look out and be aware that some of the brightest minds in our local community are dedicating themselves to tackling this serious issue and other related matters. Among other relevant topics discussed at the conference were climate change, health reporting by the media, and social concepts surrounding the integrated approach that One Health promotes. Mr. Speaker, I turn next to the area of mental health, which we can all attest is every bit as important as physical well-being. You may know that a few months ago we received planning approval for the long-term residential mental health facility. This development will allow Caymanians in need of long-term mental health care to finally be able to receive such treatment within our own shores. You may not yet be aware that more recently still, we received approval from the Central Tenders Committee to pre-qualify successful bidders for construction of this much-needed facility. Mr. Speaker, with construction of the facility expected to commence this fall, the project team, which is led by my ministry, anticipates a very busy summer as we look to move forward with this much needed project. Another demographic of whose unique concerns I am glad to report we have been able to make progress in our population of some 4,000 persons aged 65 and over. You may be aware that the Department of Health Regulatory Services and the Health Insurance Commission have been working with a Canadian firm. Their objective is to investigate the feasibility of the Cayman Islands introducing a health insurance plan that targets the special needs of our very dear seniors. This work included in a public consultation with all stakeholders on subject, which took place in March and April of this year. In addition, a 22-question survey sought to gauge general public opinion on the need for such a specialized plan and was available online and in print. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to say that we received close to 900 responses from the community and very high quality information from healthcare providers and insurance vendors. The consultants are set to produce an interim report next month that will use input from the consultation and other measures to determine a suitable set schedule of benefits for the local environment. It will also produce an actuarial determined health insurance premium rate for persons aged 65 and older. A final report is expected in the fall, which will be made public. Mr. Speaker, with this information in hand, the Cayman Islands government should be able to take the best informed decision possible on how we can provide current and future senior with cost-effective, cost-efficient health care that affords them the best possible quality of life. Mr. Speaker, members of this Honourable House will know that I am equally passionate about the need to address some of these issues we are facing in regards to the health of our children and youth. My concerns about some of the barriers that families may be facing in addressing health care for this important cohort of our population. Once the feasibility studies for the older person's health insurance is completed, the next area I plan to turn my ministry's attention is that of affordable, accessible health care for our children and youth. As members of this Honourable House, we hear too often about the challenges that families are facing with health care for the children and youth, and the concerns regarding the affordability of that care and their health insurance. Mr. Speaker, every one of us knows that chronic, non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and hypertension are a huge burden on our health system, not just in terms of costs, but the negative impacts they have on our quality of life. The incidence of chronic non-communicable diseases has been increasing across all ages. And I believe one of the keys to reversing that trend is to invest in preventative care for our youth. By building healthy habits from the very youngest age and ensuring that our children and our youth are getting regular access to preventative care. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that now we can turn the tide. We need to invest in our children's health now, Mr. Speaker, to improve the health of the Cayman Islands in the future. In the fall of this year, I plan to convene a multi-stakeholder task force to make recommendations to the government on how we might proceed to address some of these issues and ensure a healthy future for our Cayman Islands. I will look forward to updating the members of this Honourable House as this important work progresses. Staying with the subject of youth, an important role our young people have to play in securing a healthy and sustainable future for our beloved Cayman Islands. I would like to take this opportunity to share two recent interactions I was fortunate enough to have with some of our amazing young people in this Cayman Islands. Many will be aware of the increasing concerns regarding plastic pollution globally and some of the fantastic work that is being done to raise awareness and encourage consumers to make individual choices to help minimize this problem. Mr. Speaker, as a country of these Cayman Islands, we are particularly susceptible to the impacts of plastic pollution from outside our borders. I'm sure everyone here has had an experience along our beautiful shoreline that was sullied by plastic and that has washed ashore. While the plastic pollution we see on our beaches has mostly been caused by actions of others far away, we have a duty, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we are taking steps to minimize our contribution to this problem. On World Ocean Day, I had the pleasure of meeting with students from a number of schools from across the island who gathered on the steps of the government administration building to present me with their letters imploring the government to take steps to address plastic pollution. Ranging from the youngest child in reception to high school students, these children and youth were united in their desire to see the Cayman Islands take positive and tangible steps to address this issue. Mr. Speaker, I am still working my way through all the letters that the students gave me that day, but I have to say that I have been very impressed by their level of knowledge and their passion for cause. I also had an opportunity that week to meet with some students who had done a school research project on how to deal with impacts from sargassum, or some may call it seaweed, and whether it could be used as fertilizer. I was very impressed, Mr. Speaker, with the level of research the students had done and their application of the scientific methods in their experiment. Their curiosity and critical thinking were remarkable. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that after my interactions with the young people that week, I was left with a real sense of optimism and hope for the future of these Cayman Islands. The passion, curiosity, and commitment to make things better are qualities that I hope these young people will continue to embrace as they move forward in their lives. On the topic of sargassum, Mr. Speaker, I am sure that all the members of this Honourable House are aware of their apparent increased incidence of this aquatic plant arriving on our shores. While this is not a new issue, this year it seems that we are seeing increasing amounts of sargassum on our beaches and waterways. The Department of Environment issued some guidelines in 2015. However, the scale of this issue has increased over the last couple of years, and we are now experiencing problems in our canals and coastal embayments, which is creating further environmental problems due to oxygen depletion in the water column. While it is something of a nuisance, when it reaches our shores, sargassum is a natural part of the oceanic system and provides habitat for over 120 species of fish and crustaceans, as well as juvenile turtles. So any proposals to remove sargassum from the sea before it reaches our shores will need to be carefully thought through. The accumulation of sargassum on our shores, or seaweed in our waterways, and how best to deal with this removal are going to be considered by a multi-stakeholder committee being convened by the Department of Environment this week. Representatives from the DOE, Planning Department, Department of Tourism, Department of Agriculture, the Recreational Parks and Cemeteries Unit of Public Works, and my ministry will be getting together to discuss a coordinated response and set of protocols to deal with this issue. The sort of cross-government collaboration is essential to identifying and implementing sustainable practices to address this issue. And I want to take this opportunity to thank my fellow cabinet colleagues for supporting their technical staff and coming together to address this issue. Mr. Speaker, I also want to give a small brief on the area of housing. As I immediately started my term last year as minister, we got to work and set out to build in the district of Bordentown 16 new homes, which are almost completed, Mr. Speaker. In learning from the last time we built homes in our 2009-13 election, we learned that we built homes and didn't pair people with the homes and had to wait 1 year whilst the homes were already built to find persons to put in these homes. This time what we did was we have already found 16 new homeowners, and they're now in waiting for these homes to be completed. The roofs are on, and it's a true testament of this government, and I really thank all the ministers in cabinet and caucus for their full support of this project, the National Housing Development Trust. And I want to thank the chairman of the board, his committee, and the staff of the National Housing Trust for all the hard work they have done and getting this project along so fast. The houses were up very, very quickly. They're all local Caymanian contractors, and all from the Eastern District. And I'm very proud of the work that they're doing there, Mr. Speaker, and we ought to applaud them. And hopefully soon we will have persons living in these and can call the Cayman Islands and call it the Cayman Islands home and own a piece of this rock. The final area that I want to cover today in this is environmental health. I'd like to begin with a few words about the Integrated Solid Waste Management System project. As most of us know, the Cayman Islands government and the DECO Consortium are continuing negotiations to the list of technical, financial, and legal reserve matters that need to be resolved before the contract for this project can be finalized. This is expected to take until the end of the year. I understand the frustration that some members of the public have expressed concerning the pace of these negotiations. Yet I must point out that we are obligated to ensure that the government and the people of the Cayman Islands receive the best possible value for money, and will take every step necessary to do this. It is of the utmost importance that we get this matter right before the contract is signed. I believe is in time well invested. I want to further reiterate that the new waste management facility depends on the completion of an environmental impact assessment as per our National Conservation Council directives. Accordingly, the DECO Consortium has been working on a draft terms of reference for the assessment in tandem with contract negotiations. Once the Environmental Assessment Board approves the release of the draft terms of reference, these must also undergo public consultation. Members of the public will be invited to attend meetings to review and discuss the draft terms of reference, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of the opportunity to participate in this important component of project process. Mr. Speaker, details of these meetings will be published in the media as soon as these dates have been confirmed. In addition to an acceptable EIA is completing, planning approval must be in place before any construction work starts. It is hoped that planning approval will be received by the first quarter of 2019. It should be noted that even if negotiations are completed at this point, the contract cannot be finalized until both the EIA is completed and the planning approval is received, as both of these may impose conditions on the proposed system. Of course, the highly desirable end goal, which we are all working, is that when awarded, there will be a long-term 25-year design, build, finance, operate, and maintain contract in place between the Cayman Islands government and the DECO Consortium. The outcome of this will be historic transformation of solid waste management across these three Cayman Islands. On this note, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to end by informing the members of this Honourable House that we are very, very close to the end of the tire shredding project. Shredding has been ongoing at the Georgetown landfill for just over a year. Accordingly, and I hope to soon invite you all to watch the last tire from stockpile being placed on shredder. I will look forward to sharing that movement with you. Mr. Speaker, in the months ahead, I look forward to continued collaboration with the team within my ministry for the advancement of all areas under our remit and the well-being of the people of the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I thank you to the constituents of Bordentown East for having patience, but noting all the contributions that I've been making so far throughout the year and other commitments to Bordentown in terms of projects that we hope to achieve throughout this term. Some of those will be addressed at the community meetings being held. Please look out for these notices. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sir. You're here.
Thank you, Minister. The member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence because there was nothing said in here about garbage collection, but I'm wondering if the minister would be so kind to let us know if what is being done in brief about garbage collection, because we're continually hearing complaints from our constituents about the lack of garbage collection, and the neighborhoods are not looking very well in the absence of garbage collection.
Does the Honourable Minister wish to take on that item at this point, or would you rather wait until you have some time to put a substantive statement together on it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can get a statement prepared for tomorrow. Okay. The Honourable Member from Easton wishes. Thank you for your interest. But it is highly talked about and a vexing issue throughout the Cayman Islands, and we're doing our best to try to address this situation.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that is acceptable. I know the minister didn't come prepared for that, so that's fine by me.
Thank you. Clerk. Next item.
Personal explanations.
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raising a matter of privileges.
None.
Other business. Private member motions. Private member motion number 12 of 2017-18. Increase in mortgage withdrawal.
The clerk.
Sir?
The House will take the lunch. The House will take the lunch suspension until 2:15. When we return to private members' motion.